Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today is Comprehensivist Wednesday. This is the second Wednesday of the month. And so today we are going to be going through one of Bucky's big ideas. The big idea we're going through today is integrity. This is one of the biggest. I felt that I was ready to tackle it since we sort of tackled universe last month. So I have had the delight of chatting with a couple of different of our regulars on this topic, and I've been pouring through Bucky's works. And so I've come up with a new model. We've got some visuals for you, and I've got a presentation, and I'm very excited to share that with you today. So what we're looking at is I'm going to share with you now, just for those of you who might be new, Buckminster Fuller. We affectionately call him Bucky. Most people do, because Buckminster is quite the mouthful. A little bit of admin stuff. I ask you, please remain muted unless you're speaking. And then if you wanted to chat, we'll have question and discussion after the presentation. It's not very many slides. I might actually do questions before a couple of slides because they're heavy. And we're going to get into the fourfold path of integrity. I had a vision for what I thought the fourfold path looked like, and then Stroopy had a different vision, and we merged the two, and we've got this beautiful baby that we're sharing with you today. So without further ado, and if you guys will forgive me, I'm going to set up the slides. Okay, is that clearly visible, Shrikant?
Yep.
All right, so, well, this is first page. This is Bucky's definition of principle of integrity. The principle of universal integrity states that the wide arc, tensive or implosive forces of universe always inherently encompass the short arc, vectorial, explosive, disintegrative forces of universe. And this is directly in his book, Synergetics. I should have put that there. It's 231.0. So if you were looking for it, that's where you can find that in his book. We are going to unpack this a couple different ways as we go throughout the night. Integrity defined. I wanted to give you his definition in comparison with the standard definition you'll find in a couple different dictionaries. So Bucky tells us it's the interconnectedness and interdependence of all elements within a system or structure. In the common day-to-day, when you hear integrity, you're thinking an adherence to moral and ethical principles, a soundness of moral character, state of being. As we move through today, you'll see that this is a yes and type of situation. Bucky's definition brings a preciseness and conciseness at looking at the concept of integrity, but it encompasses the other definitions that you'll encounter in your day-to-day. So there's no contradiction here in what you usually think of when you think of integrity. So this is a lot, but this is a little bit more I want to give you on this concept. So if we're talking mathematically, in general, you're going to think of it as, something that is consistent, rigorous, and it's complete, free from contradictions when you think of integrity from a mathematical perspective. And again, Bucky includes that perspective and takes it one step further. He says, yes, there's completeness. Yes, there's consistency, honesty, ethical behavior. Also, this comprehensivity that we're all seeking, he tells us it's vital to the concept of integrity. We should be considering the long-term consequences of our actions and the impact they have on the greater whole. That is the deep, abiding idea of integrity from humanity perspective. Okay, so what are you looking at here? This is the fourfold path of integrity. These little circles are actually, I don't know how many are there, but it is, we've talked about this before. It's a, icosahedron type of a shape. So triangle within a triangle within a triangle, creating this format. So this was to show you how we see integrity working. So there's 4 paths to integrity. You're going to have the integrity of tension, integrity of the whole, integrity of pattern, and integrity of individual. The opposing ones, if you're looking here, on the opposite flat panel, if we were looking at a tetrahedron from its 4 sides, that's what these are. You have, so pattern with acting, individual with intuiting, thinking with the whole, and feeling with tension. So we're going to unpack this a little bit more. This is kind of like the sexy, high level imagery, as it were. Here's another way of saying the same thing. We're putting these concepts together to show you, so there's at least 4 kinds of integrities present within living systems. And the 4 aspects of our consciousness are interrelated and work together when we're looking at this concept of integrity. I have a slide for each one of these. I'm going to go through them, and then I'm going to invite folks to make comments. I'll go back to these specifically so you can ask about them. But I was thinking, I think you need a little bit more info before we start question asking. So we're starting with the integrity of tension and feeling. So the integrity of tension is the structural stability, balance, and coherence of tensegrity systems. So tensegrity is something that, Bucky came up with that phrase, and, he does come up with these words that just perfectly speak to what we're trying to say. And the idea here is that the tension in everything that we approach, so you're talking your perceptions, your attitudes, your behaviors, that's within you, that is the feeling aspect of your human nature. The feeling aspect of your human nature is the tension of your human nature. And if you approach those with the idea of integrating and balancing what all of those are, the perceptions, the attitudes, the behaviors, then what you're going to find is that you're going to have this integrity of tension. If you allow all of these to just kind of flounder about and burst out of you randomly, then you're going to be out of balance and you're losing the integrity. So when we're talking of integrity of tension and feeling, that's what we mean. Seeking a balance within those types of things, within and without. How you interact with others from this aspect of tension is also going to inform how you react, how you put things together, and how other things in turn, because everything that you touch is touching something else. So that's the idea of, so many tensions exist in our lives. And that's the counterbalance to that, or counterpoint. Your consciousness, the feeling consciousness, is the one that is going to be working with the tension. Looking at the integrity of the whole, that's your thinking aspect, right? When your thinking consciousness is where you're going to consider the whole. So the integrity of the whole is the unity in plurality of inside and outside of universe. Just to remind you, Bucky defines universe as the aggregate of all humanity's consciously apprehended and communicated non-simultaneous and only partially overlapping experiences. I know that's a mouthful, but just so you know, when he says universe, that's what he's saying. And the reason I put that definition there was to remind you that when we say whole, we're thinking the biggest whole possible, the all-encompassing concept of the whole. You know, comprehensive and holistic thinking is the key for maintaining integrity of the whole. You know, everything is connected and interdependent. And failing to account for that weakens your integrity of the whole. If you get stuck in looking at different members individually as opposed to the whole, but then you're going to be weaker for it. And so many aspects of what Bucky's philosophy is about this idea of needing to, you know, take a step up. And the way that we take ourselves one step higher from what would be just a part is that we switch to thinking as opposed to just feeling. And when you take one step up, now you can envision the members that are going to comprise of this whole. And then you can act accordingly, move forward accordingly. And one of the ideas that was near and dear to Bucky is that considering the whole system, its patterns, and its underlying principles, that's the best way to come up with the most efficient, sustainable, and harmonious solutions. And he goes so far as to say, this is key to the salvation of humanity, or the evolution of humanity lies within the ability to do this. Our thinking consciousness is what will enable us to preserve, maintain, increase the integrity of the whole. So the next integrity is the integrity of patterns, and we're matching patterns with acting. So the integrity of patterns refers to the harmonious relationship and coherence of patterns in the universe. So what this means, so when you are, if you're just acting, like say that you just skipped past thinking, you're just acting on your feelings, you may not be even considering any patterns. So a pattern tells you that, you know, this thing goes with this other thing, and then there's an interdependence, or there's a relationship, or there's a codependence. If you just act without integrity, you're acting without considering those aspects. So what we're saying here is that acting with integrity means intentionally moving within the framework that best provides for the preservation and optimization of these patterns and relationships to ensure the efficient functioning of the whole. And you'll see as we're going through, you know, it's almost impossible to reference one integrity without the other, or one consciousness without the other, because again, everything, it's all interrelated and they're all necessary. So again, the integrity of patterns will increase your ability to have an efficient functioning of the whole. And if you look at it from the consciousness, it makes sense that if you are thinking and not just feeling, well then when you are acting, the result will be improved. I'm going to say that one more time. When you are thinking and not just feeling, when you move to acting, the end result will be more efficient and improved. And that takes us to the last. And we're not saying with absolute authority that there are only 4 paths. These are not explicitly stated in this manner by Bucky. This is my, you know, synopsizing of how I'm understanding his concept of integrity. The last one here that I'm presenting for you today is the integrity of the individual. And I've allied that with intuiting. We've in the past maybe called this sensing. I like intuiting because it brings to mind the idea of intuition. And I think so many individuals forget that we are intuitive creatures. And the integrity of the individual refers to the coherence, authenticity, and wholeness of a person's character, actions, and values. Looking at this, I think that sincerity should also be added in that one line. I don't just think it. Actually, Strupi also mentioned that, we should add sincerity here. So Bucky believed that individuals should strive to align their thoughts, beliefs, and actions with their true selves and to live in accordance with their own personal integrity. Living with integrity involves being true to oneself and acting in a way that is consistent with one's core values, principles, and sense of purpose. It means acting with honesty, authenticity, and ethical conduct in all aspects of life. This requires a level of self-awareness, introspection, and reflection for all of us. And I think that we get there through utilizing the other three integrities of tension, of all the other, the four of them together coalesce to help us create the best forward path for ourselves. And if we are living with an integrity of the individual, of our individual self, it's almost by default that you are living with an integrity of those things that are in your surrounding. Because remember, everything you touch touches you. Everything is interconnected and interrelated. So if you are being as intense in your upholding of your individual self-integrity, it's just going to reverberate out almost naturally. And the thing about integrity is that, this call to recognizing that integrities exist in nature. We exist in nature. So we have a natural integrity. It's just I view Bucky's concept of integrity as a call for all of us to look at it with intention and move forward with an intent to seek the integrities of everything within and everything without. So that's it for the slides I have for us, Shrikant. I know it was a lot. I'm going to let you take over if you want to do questions and such.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And if I have to step away, just please take over. So if you could stop sharing.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, folks. So comments and questions. So I'm going to start with the question, and then we can go ahead and please go ahead and type exclamation mark to ask a question or raise your hand in Zoom. As always, we have the 4 rules. I'm going to bring back the 4 rules to keep the discussion on track here. Number 1, raise your hand or type exclamation mark when you want to speak. Number 2, keep on topic, talking about integrity. Number 3, be concise. Okay, just make your words count. And number 4, be courteous. All right, that's it. So one question for you. CJ started us off with these 4 on-ramps. Can you map those 4 on-ramps, not to the thinking, feeling stuff, but just those 4, tension, wholeness, pattern, and individual?
I would need
them mapping.
I'm sorry?
How do you see them mapping?
I would need to grab his exact word.
Sure.
Do you have his 4?
Yeah. His 4 are: 1 is geometry.
Geography?
Geometry. These are
Geometry.
4 on-ramps to energetics. 1 was geometry. 2nd is design, making of things. 3rd was collaboration. And 4th was integrities, holistic thinking. So how do you think these 4 match, or do they, to these the 4 things of tension, wholeness, pattern, and
if we use integrities, that would be a little harder. But if we use holistic thinking, I would say the geometry would be the patterns to me. Design would be the acting.
Yes.
Collaboration would be the whole. And then I would say the holistic thinking would actually be the individual.
Great. Wonderful. So now let's go to everybody else. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom in order to either ask a question or make a comment. We're going to start with Andrea. Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask the question, because integrity, depending upon how you look at it, is probably a very loaded word for most of us. And Maritza, what was the term that you used? Something like integrated thinking. So I just want to clarify that in the Bucky universe, that the word is not a loaded word. Is that correct? I mean, it means, I guess I almost feel like a better term would be integrative thinking rather than integrity, because integrity has a very high moral content.
So this is why this slide was presented. So this is Bucky's definition. I understand that there is a heavy moral component, but that's okay, because if you're seeking to be a moral person, there is no contradiction here. His definition encompasses the other definitions. And I don't think that when looking at concepts for improving one's core being, there's need for worry about, a loaded societal word.
Thank you. Let's see. Next up is going to be Barbara, followed by Joe. Barbara.
I'm sorry, can you pass me right now?
Sure, sounds good. Anytime you want to speak, go ahead and raise your hand or type exclamation mark in the chat. Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm most interested actually in the integrity of the whole. I think that actually encompasses a lot of what we're talking about. And I think that the important part about this is the idea of experience and what actually experience means within that framework. That's where we're talking about non-simultaneous, only partial overlapping experiences. And I think we should explore that and break that out. I would like to hear other people's opinions on that. The other part is, I think it would be interesting to explore a little bit more is this idea of just tensegrity and how it can be applied. We talked a little bit about that when Richard was here. Because there's a lot to tensegrity. It's not just tension and compression. It involves collaboration. So you're looking at flexibility and adaptability within that framework. And you're also looking at the interconnectedness of things. And when we're talking about the whole, I think that's kind of important as well. So I think I would, probably put that on the table as a talking point, because then we can start to see how these things kind of work together. I think the important part is patterns as well, understanding what patterns really are, and how they relate to our perception and our observations. And then there's a strong metaphysical component to all of this as well that I think we should explore. The metaphysical component of this is a living system. So if we're saying this is a living system, we're a living system. We have integrity, right? Nature has integrity. Structures have integrity, right? Then what does that mean? What are the implications of that? And there can be very deep implications as far as one's belief systems or their actions. So I think that those are areas that we could explore. I think the main one, actually, probably the last one makes the most sense, because if we were to explore that, then we can get to the point of what experience is within that. We start to identify, what is integrity within the whole? Where does it exist? Does it exist in all things? And Bucky says it does. It exists in structures and as well as living sentient beings. And that's clear, like it's our own personal integrity, right? That we're maintaining our own principles, and that's where, and actually the jitterbug we could come back to, how that folds into the minimum system. I think these are all areas I think that are good to explore. I don't know, but I think probably the question I would put on the table is, how are we defining the whole, in the sense that it's not just beyond the overlapping experiences. What are experiences within that? And what does it mean to be integrity? Like, what does integrity mean both in nature, humans, buildings, structural tension, compression, and then how flexibility and adaptability, all this, that's tensegrity. So how tensegrity fits into that? Anyway, that's, I think, revealed.
I would just to follow up on some of the things you're saying, I would actually like to go one step further and invite people to look at these aspects that Joe has pointed out. Look at them interwovenly. Because if you'll notice, Joe actually, as he kept speaking, he hit upon all four of the integrities. He talked about all four of them. And I think that the reason is that it's very hard to speak about one of them without speaking about the others. So the patterns, the individual, the tension, the whole, there is a interwoven aspect to all of that. So when thinking about it, I would invite you to look at it from that perspective. There is a question in the chat, Shrikant.
Yes, let's go with Becky, and then we will go for a question from Andrea. Becky, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to start off with just saying that I am a bit more ignorant about Bucky's definition of integrity, but I do want to bring up what was mentioned by Joe and Maritza. I think talking about equilibrium, trying to aim for consistency, like that is important. But at the same time, it's like, well, how big is our system? And so the bigger that our system becomes and that's going to be more representative of reality, the harder it is to keep or to say that this is consistent or to be so rigid that everything must be consistent. And so it makes me think of the Gödel's incompleteness theorem. And let me see if I can just pull that up. All right, so according to Wiki, the first incompleteness theorem states that no consistent system of axioms whose theorems can be listed by an effective procedure, i.e. an algorithm, is capable of proving all truths about the algorithmic of natural numbers. For any such consistent formal system, there will always be statements about natural numbers that are true, but that are unproven within the system. And the second incompleteness theorem, an extension of the first, shows that the system cannot demonstrate its own consistency. And so I think that's encouraging because as soon as we are so convinced of our own integrity and that it is a fixed equilibrium, then we cease to allow new things to come in. So going back to like, what is the system? It's like, well, you don't want to reduce it down to such a small unit where, okay, you're almost completely sure of its consistency. So it's like consistency it is a good aim, but at the same time, it's like that equilibrium that we're trying to obtain. It's a growing one. It leaves room for holding paradox and unresolved contradictions. But it's still very true that you also want to aim for that consistency and that integrity. So that's all I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. So Bucky saw consistency as a fundamental principle for achieving efficiency, harmony, and sustainability. He believed that consistent design and engineering principles were essential for creating structures and systems that functioned optimally and integrated seamlessly with their environment. So in this sense, consistency means adhering to a set of coherent principles or rules throughout the design and implementation process. So we're not necessarily, when we're talking about consistency, I think that there is because he's referencing nature, I think he's allowing for an underlying, almost axiomatic assumption that it's not a static. Consistency is not a static thing. It's not like I have achieved consistency, I'm done. It's this, life is iterative. We are life, right? So everything we do is iterative. So as you're functioning within this this idea, we're looking at designing, it's like designing your life type of thing. So you're looking for consistency within the realm that you're working. Bucky invites you to look at the 1,000-foot level. So if you are looking at a very myopic little sliver of whatever you are designing, there is a greater chance that you're going to have a more static consistency, but also a greater chance that you will have failed to observe aspects that are interconnected that may be throwing you off and you don't know it. And the smaller your vision, the more rigid you are. This idea of tension, as you look with a greater lens and you account for a couple more things, now you have a little bit more flexibility in where you're going there. So, Joe was talking about experiences, and I have not seen Bucky explicitly define experiences, like not in any kind of a comprehensive manner, but he has spoken about the nature of experiences. And he speaks of experiences and human perception in relation to like his greater thoughts on anticipatory design processes. So, he talks about comprehensive anticipatory design science. And I think that when he's talking about consistency, or he's talking about experiences, there's a lot of interpretation there, but remember that I'm kind of a neophyte for Bucky, but my understanding of what he's postulating when he uses those terms is he's looking at it as you are consistent within your consideration. You are going to have to readjust. Every time you reiterate, seek a new consistency. And not necessarily that it's a new consistency, but seek consistency anew, if that makes sense. I hope I haven't lost anyone.
Maritza, I have a proposal here. I think what we should do is that I think, what Andrea started out with, I think she's onto something. Integrity is a loaded word. It has a lot of meaning for people. Now, Bucky is notorious for using words in a different way. Okay, and I think it applies to integrity too. He's using it in a different way than what most people think of. So how about we let people put on the table in a very concise way what they understand as integrity. Let's get all of those things on the table, and then let's compare that to Bucky's notion of integrity and see how it maps. What do you think?
Okay, let's give it a whirl.
Okay, folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark to talk about what integrity means to you. Okay, well, what do you understand by integrity? And try to be concise. You don't have to give a definition. You can talk for 2 minutes. And I want to get all of those things on the table. And then we can look at what is it that Bucky does with integrity, but let's go in 2 steps. Okay. So let's start with, would love to hear from as many people as possible. Next up is going to be Evanik, followed by Joe. Evanik.
Okay, so I see integrity as 2 ways. And I'm going to use an example in recent news, 95 North collapsing in Philadelphia. What I see is when the truck lost control and it burned, that bridge lost integrity and it all fell to the ground, right? That's the way I look at it from a structural standpoint. So if the foundation of a structure is not sound, it will go down, right? Like it just will collapse, as we saw there, if the structure is also broken. I think in terms of, the second thing I think of in terms of morality is, in the training program, they were saying, integrity is your word. If you're looking at it, I don't like to use moral standpoint, but from how things work for each person, you give your word to something and either you honor it or you don't. Either you keep it or you don't. If you keep it, things will, things that you're working towards will work. It will work in that way. If you don't keep your word or you don't honor your word, like in life, things will fall apart. Not because you're immoral, but because if you don't keep your word to something, like let's say if you say you're going to eat healthy and you're going to lose weight, right? Let's just be practical. Like you say, you're going to eat healthy, you're going to diet, you're going to exercise. When you don't keep your word to that, you don't get the results that you want. And you may not get the results that you want anyway, but at least you tried and you kept your word. And so at least you could look at yourself and say, I did the best that I could instead of I failed. So that's the way those are the 2 ways I look at integrity.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to keep all the notes, and we'll try to put forth everything that people are saying about integrity. And then we are going to, go back to Bucky. So would love to hear from as many people as possible. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a highly stable system that where there's an internal consistency. And what do I mean by that? Internal consistency with, let's just say you have a set of values, and those values are aligned to actions, and that those actions are, in line with what you claimed your values are. So that can work both as an individual, and that is a certain stability, there's a certain consistency within that. If you are out of balance, there is no equilibrium, then you have a cognitive dissonance where there's some conflict, and that has different ways of manifesting itself. Just as you would have the same type of issues within a structure, in the sense that a structure would have to be as well stable. And that also means with a, with an equilibrium that, where everything is, yeah, I mean, it's essentially, it's in holding up its structure as its integrity. So I think, but this relates to, again, everything. It doesn't just relate to buildings and ourselves. It relates to, in Bucky's terms, it relates to the planet itself. So how we view nature, and if we essentially are out of balance with nature, then that is also an equilibrium. This is where the environmental part of Bucky kind of comes in the sense that he's saying if we're out of balance with nature and what we're doing to the environment. So from there, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Folks would love to hear from a few other people about what you mean by integrity. Andrea, would you like to repeat, your question? You had asked a question about the traditional view of integrity and this one. So could you talk a little bit about what integrity means to you?
Yeah, I don't want to say a lot because I don't want to bias anything that anybody says.
Go ahead. Say a lot and try. And
bias
everybody will
people.
try not
Okay.
to be biased by it. Go ahead.
You guys know me, you'll forgive me. I think integrity, as Bucky uses it, implies a system where things are interrelated and there is a dependency of things upon one another. And you were looking at the whole and saying everything affects anything else. So if you tweak X, Y changes. If you tweak Y, Z changes, to use an example. But integrity is a very loaded term in terms of morality. So I'm sitting here with my neighbor, Susan, who's also listening in, and we're talking about like being an integrous person.
Yes.
And that term
Yeah.
has huge moral implications.
So please talk about that.
Well, one thing that I wanted to say, and CJ is here in my brain forever. Thank goodness. CJ would be talking about measurement, and he would be talking about agreed to units of measurement. And you can't talk about an agreed to unit of measure when you're talking about something being integrous. Like, so are you integrous on a scale of 0 to 1, with 1 being the most integrated and 0 being the least integrated? That would be like looking at variables in that are having an effect and saying this variable has a larger part in the equation than other variables do. And I can see Maritza staring off into space, and she's got all this like financial data in her head. Like, so if you look at factors, I'm going to use a really terrible example here. This is a really terrible example. I recently read a book called The Gene, An Intimate History. And it's talking about things like the BRCA gene for breast cancer. And it's like, one of the things that it says is that you can't say that you're going to get breast cancer because gene number 1 out of a series of 10 is turned on or off. What's important is that gene number 1 is turned on and gene number 2 is at setting number 3 and at setting number C, and gene number 3 is at setting number 4 or whatever. And so it's actually, we have to agree to terms. We have to agree to, and like value is not an agreed to term. Integrity is not an agreed to term. It's kind of like saying we look at a combination of factors, and if those factors all have a specific setting, so if X is equal to 1 and Y is equal to 7 and C is and Z is equal to 3, then you'll get a certain result. And if X is equal to 1, I forget the numbers I just used. If X is equal to 1 and Y is equal to 6 and Z is equal to 4, you're going to get a very different result. And there's such a temptation to look at things remarkably simplistically. It's either on or it's off. It's not on or it's off. It's, this combination of factors, 1 plus 7 plus 3 is equal to 11. 1 plus 8 plus 3 is equal to 12. I hope I did my math right. Anyway, thank you, Maritza.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
So I hope that was meaningful, but it's very much a combination of things, which we don't necessarily agree to. So that makes it very, very difficult. You have to have some consistency of terms. And if we got even more abstract than 1 plus 3 plus 10 or 1 plus 3 plus 8, what does 1 represent? And this is Joe and I had a brief discussion a couple days ago about wicked.
Let's do
something
one
called
thing,
wicked
Andrea.
problems.
Andrea, let's have other people
Yep.
put on the table
Okay.
their
Sorry.
notion of integrity, and then
Yep.
we can go. Maritza had something, and then Bill.
Just real quick, Shrikant, maybe I should wait till everyone else has commented. I
Please.
have CJ's definition of integrity.
Perfect, perfect. Bill, go ahead.
Okay, thanks for calling on me. I'm lying in bed, so the angle on my camera is a little funky. Bear with me. I'd like to approach integrity and tensegrity from the angle that it would be approached by economists and political economists who study contracts. So to be clear, I'm talking about integrity and tensegrity in human relationships, not integrity or tensegrity in the way that an office building is constructed, by an architect and a construction company. So human relationships I'm talking about. So academics who study contracts do talk about contractual integrity, and they also talk about contractual structure as having integrity or lacking integrity. So here's what they mean. So a contract, let's consider the simple case of a contract between two individuals. It's a distribution of rights and obligations between the two individuals that enables cooperation in the technical sense that when each side fulfills its obligations and commitments in the contract, the other side receives a benefit greater than its own cost of fulfilling its commitments. So each one receives a benefit greater than its cost and is therefore made better off by the cooperative relationship. And so each side will continue in the cooperative relationship as long as that condition is met. It's kind of like a structural integrity condition analogous to the engineering conditions that need to be met for a building to stand up and not fall over. Two people will continue cooperating as long as each receives benefit from the other greater than its own cost of bestowing benefit on the other. So that's a structural integrity condition that the contract terms have to meet. And then there's the question of dynamic integrity over time as things change. As costs and benefits change, it might become more costly to one party to fulfill its commitments, or the benefit he receives from the other party's performance of their obligations might not be as high as he thought it was, or you might get gaps in the contract terms that leave it ambiguous what the distribution of rights and obligations is, and there needs to be some adaptation. Write a new contract term, modify the existing contract terms. This is all a way of kind of being more precise about the concepts that Maritza talked about in her 4 categories. So, with feeling category that she talked about, that relates to the way people measure the benefits that they receive from the other person in the relationship. Is it good? Is it bad? Intuition category that Maritza talked about. One might have an intuition that something's a little off. The other person isn't doing what they promised, or what they're doing it, but it's not, producing the benefits one was expecting. And then pattern with respect to action is basically modifying the contract terms. Like, pattern is lane markers, and a lot of the language that I'll stop here with this because I could go on, but I've gone on a while. I'm just filling out for you guys what the analysis would look like in terms of translating Maritza's categories. So I'll give one last example. She talked about pattern being related to action. And there was language in there about pretty much lane markers for behavior. Well, that's what contract terms are. They're lane markers for behavior in a cooperative relationship. And there was even in one of Maritza's categories, literally language about it being efficient. When something's got integrity, it's literally efficient. Well, the way a contract economist would define contractual efficiency is literally when each side receives benefit greater than its own cost from staying in the cooperative relationship. That's efficient in the sense that it's producing mutual gains from exchange. And the trick over time is to keep the contract terms updated so that it continues to maintain the contractual integrity of the cooperative relationship and each side continues to receive benefits greater than cost. I hope that way of labeling these concepts and analyzing it can give traction for really analyzing situations in terms of what's the cause of the conditions that need to be met for integrity to be created and maintained. What's the causes of a loss of integrity, etc. So I'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Wonderful. Excellent point. Thank you, Bill. Next up is going to be Laura. Laura, go ahead. What is integrity?
As always, Laura has a problem.
We can hear you.
Okay, let's look at integrity in the personal sense. We can look at it, each degree of growth has, let's say, a level of integrity. And so that, there's a measure of when you act, have you met that level, or not. And so that becomes difficult, of course. What does it mean to have those levels? Is there a certain, when you reach 100, have you full integrity? I don't know how you would go along with that, but how you define levels that you are in the units. But I guess we've also done that, and we continue to do that. And what keeps a child behind is they're not reaching the level of integrity. That doesn't sound good. And what do we do with those people who are not proceeding along? I mean, obviously we always want people to move along and reach a goal point. And many people will not reach that goal point when we look at personal growth and so forth, for a whole variety of reasons of societal implications, etc. So I'm just wondering how we deal with that, because it's complicated.
Wonderful. So we'll, people growing in integrity. Wonderful. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to try to summarize. It's very, very hard to do that, but it's just amazing list of things that people have put on the table. And so I want to list all of them to kind of build up the concept of integrity as different people see it. Let's maybe talk about it just a little bit and then compare it systematically to Bucky's concept of integrity, if we can. Okay, Evanique talked about it as having a solid foundation, about keeping your word, being moral, having the consistency, being stable. Joe talked about your actions being in line and consistent with everything, them having a kind of a balance or equilibrium, making sure that everything is interrelated to one another. Andrea brought up the point about terms that, integrity is not just a single axis. You can't measure a single gene that, okay, this is integrity. It is a constellation of things working together that is producing a certain result together. And you have to work on measuring those things. I'm going to continue, but first, Barbara wants to add something. So Barbara, go ahead. Barbara.
Hi. Sorry, I was just writing down my thoughts so I didn't forget. I think integrity is a set of values that you base your life on, and they don't change based on the circumstances or the other people that you're around that maybe want you to compromise your values to accommodate their happiness or to keep peace in relationships and things like that. So I think it's standing your ground on your values that you believe in your heart, not what your parents taught you, not what the people around you are doing. I think people with integrity are more leaders than followers, because followers kind of bend their values and go up and down with whatever's going on around them, where you have integrity, you're really stable and stand your ground and don't flex, you're not flexible with them. That's what integrity is to me.
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara, for adding this. So I'm going to continue summarizing everybody's what everybody says as best as I can. And then look forward to discussing these, and then we will compare it to Bucky's idea of integrity. Bill talked about really interesting, he really gave a detailed picture of integrity in contract relations. And that's a very interesting field, because I think it goes to the, Bucky thinks like this, in terms of what arrangement over space, over time, over multiple people would be of beneficial or would be of benefit to everybody concerned. And Bill talked about, structural integrity when it is a win-win situation. So 1 + 1 is 3, not less than 2. And that this is a dynamic condition, that it keeps changing. So you have to keep changing the structure to make sure it remains just and fair to everybody, and everybody benefits from it. And you can measure it by efficiency, of saying how efficient is this arrangement. Laura talked about the standards that you have to hold yourself to when you're saying, do I have integrity? What's the standard? And secondly, she also talked about, really the important part about that there is a process of getting there. There are people who are kind of at a, are all messed up, and there is a growth path that is natural to human beings. So she was talking about the educational component of how do you learn to build integrity. Barbara talked about integrity as being the constancy of values, you being true to your values, being true to your heart, willingness to take costs in order to continue along the path you think is right. That leadership of saying, this is what I think is the right thing to do, and then building everything on it. So it's just amazing. See, I'm always amazed by the group of people who are here and the range of thoughts that they have, and how we can all build this multi-perspectival look at what we're doing. All right, so I'm going to throw it to Maritza. Maritza, would you like to add or comment on anything in general, and then we'll figure out how to go from there?
I would. I'm going to bring in CJ's words on the topic. So CJ is, he's very well versed in Bucky. He had been for a very long time. So what he says about integrity is, he says, integrity is the most continually important issue in human affairs. We must, each of us, persevere to consider and reconsider our values and the value of our actions. Integrity implies honesty with oneself and with others. Integrity implies truth, being true to the facts of experience and true to oneself and true to others, including all humanity, our earth, ocean, air, world, universe, and God. Integrity requires consideration and reconsideration of the whole and all of the members and their synergetic interrelationships. Total, complete integrity is impossible for finite humans to fully achieve. For human beings, integrity is a never-ending process requiring diligence, discipline, dedication, and continual rededication.
Wow.
Nobody says it better than CJ.
Okay, all right. Let's do one thing. Maritza, this is so good. Can you read it one more time? And then I would like to discuss it because he, in this, just in typical CJ style, he captures so much.
Absolutely. And I can
so
post it
well,
also.
he captures. Okay, so I'm going to try to put various elements. And folks, I would like us to discuss this because this is just incredible. I'm sorry, Maritza, but this is really, really, really good, compared to everything that we have discussed so far. In terms of its scope, its depth, and its delicacy with which it captures all the aspects. It's just incredible. So could you please read it again?
Absolutely. Integrity is the most continually important issue in human affairs. We must, each of us, persevere to consider and reconsider our values and the value of our actions. Integrity implies honesty. Honesty with oneself and with others. Integrity implies truth. Being true to the facts of experience and true to oneself and true to others, including all humanity, our earth, ocean, air, world, universe, and God. Integrity requires consideration and reconsideration of the whole and all the members and their synergetic interrelationships. Total, complete integrity is impossible for finite humans to fully achieve. For human beings, integrity is a never-ending process requiring diligence, discipline, dedication, and continual rededication.